I like to hear from people's different perspectives or like
Yeah.
experiences with this, because my own religious experience with Jesus and God relationship is a little bit different than the more fundamentalist one. Like the name of your show says, right? Growing up Fundy, you grew up in a fundamentalist sort of household, I imagine, and to me it seems like from what I've seen, different denominations prioritize their relationship with either God or Jesus
Hmm.
as being the most important.
Hmm.
And what did you have that in your religion? Which was it, a God relationship or a Jesus relationship or a mix?
Yeah. So I grew up what I call Fundy adjacent. So I grew up in a Baptist household. We called ourselves non-denominational, but anyone who's non-denominational knows that just means Baptist. It's just fancy for Baptist.
Okay.
But I went to church with people who, what I later learned, were fundamentalist Christians, which is very kind of an interesting concept. It's not often, I think, that you see a church that's got both in it. Um, and so in my home, like in my home life, we were, non-denominational Christian Baptists, but at church, that's where the really intense messaging came from, right? So like at home, it was pray, it was read the Bible, it was have a relationship with God and a relationship with Jesus. There's, you can have a relationship with both. But at church, that's where the purity culture messages came from. That's where a lot of the don't make men stumble in their faith by dressing and acting certain ways. Right. So I went to church with the Duggars for a little bit before they had their reality show,
Great.
before they had, right. They lived very close to my church and they would come a lot while they were building the big house they live in now. Um, so that's kind of what introduced me to the idea of fundamentalist Christians, because even when I was a kid, I remember thinking some people were very, very Christian while other people were just Christian, right? I didn't really understand what it was that was different about myself and them other than maybe the way they dressed. So when I was growing up, I was taught that you can have a personal relationship with God and you can have a personal relationship with Jesus, and that you should pray and you should talk to God and you should talk to Jesus and you should accept Jesus as your savior, and accept him into your heart, get baptized, um, and that everyone's relationship with God and Jesus is different. But we're all supposed to follow the same rules at the same time. It was very odd. It's like, okay, you all have a very unique relationship with God and relationship with Jesus, as long as you also make sure to follow the rules. Be as unique as you want, as long as you're not so unique that you're different than everybody else. Which at the time, as a kid, I didn't think much about it, but as an adult, it's so confusing. How do you have a personal, unique relationship when you all follow the same commandments and the same rules?
Right, and also like the relationship will have to be structured in the exact same way.
Right,
And
but it's unique though, but it's different, but it's unique, but it's the same.
so weird. And it brings me to this question of like, what does, because people assume that this relationship is supposed to be a mutual beneficial thing, right? Like, hey, you love God and God loves you, but and you have to pray and you have to sacrifice and you have to follow the rules and do this and do that. But what does God do in the relationship?
Isn't that a good question? Isn't that a great one of the things I talk about ad nauseum is how I personally think that Christianity impacts women's relationships with men in ways that people don't even begin to understand, because we're taught from an early age that the best relationship you'll ever be in and the most loved you'll ever be is a man who doesn't talk to you, a man who doesn't contribute to the relationship, a man who you have to ask forgiveness for, a man who's allowed to set the rules, but again, doesn't show up. You don't see him. You don't talk to him. You don't communicate with him. He's totally silent. You have to earn his love. You have to earn that relationship. You have to do all the work. And then they wonder why we grow up and we date these shitty dudes who don't communicate, they don't talk, they don't contribute to the relationship, they don't, because that's what we were told true love looks like from a man.
And another one is like, if you don't do what they want you to do, then they'll punish you, and the punishment
Yep.
is out of love. And so that leads a
Yep.
lot of women to stay in abusive relationships, thinking, "Hey, no, actually, he loves me, and he's
Yeah.
doing this because it's the best for me, and he knows better, and he's like the head of the household." And
Yep.
it's just a really really dysfunctional dynamic that really teaches women
Yeah.
uh, of terrible things, terrible
Yeah,
relationship
yeah,
advice.
and it's like, of course, our early relationships are dysfunctional. Why would we see a problem with having to strive to earn a man's love, having to strive to earn his acceptance, having feeling like everything is our fault and we should ask forgiveness? It's crazy that people don't make that connection and they just continue to blame the women in those relationships for not leaving.
Yeah, and society even knows that, and like we don't know how to break down that pattern of the patriarchy, of like that the hierarchy that we have, and where the man always has to be the dominant, and the man always has to be the authority,
Yep.
and we even before I left religion, I had that. Like, if I had a friend that was like in an abusive relationship, I probably would have been like, well, why don't you like try, and why, and now I'm like scratch my head. I'm like, damn, why would I?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I look back on some of the things I put up with, and I considered myself quite the feminist back then. Like, I wasn't even the worst you could be when it came to shitty dudes, and I still found myself just putting up with some of the dumbest stuff that nowadays current me would just walk away from. Like, why? Like, oh, you're not who I thought. You're just like other girls. Okay, bye. As opposed to, I'm not like them. Nuh-uh, let me prove it. No, girl, don't prove anything. He just called you just like other girls. Other girls are great. Bye. See ya.
Like you don't have to adjust yourself to
Yeah.
become what the other person expects of you to be. And
Right.
the same should be said for this relationship with God. Like you shouldn't have to adjust your behavior to meet the requirements of this God's love. I don't remember having the answer to this from my days of religion, but like someone who believes thinks that God needs them for some reason. Did you ever have like any kind of reason as to why God needed your begging him for stuff or loving
I
him?
think I think when I look back at the time, so when I was a kid, it all just kind of made sense. You know, when grown-ups told you that's how things were, that's just how they were. So I didn't think that much about it, but I do remember thinking that not joining God, not being part of God's army made me part of Satan's army. And so God needs every member of his army to go
Mm.
against Satan. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. You know, you want to join God's team because if you're not on God's team, you're on Satan's team. But now, current me goes, God made the armies. Can't he just get rid of the other army? Like what are you talking about? God made the GI Joes. Why is he pretending like he can't stop the other team of GI Joes from being bad guys when he invented the whole thing and he makes the rules? But at the time it was more of a, you're going to make God really sad if you don't join his team, or if you don't love him, or if you don't worship him. It makes him so sad, and everybody you love is part of God's team. So wouldn't you want to be part of God's team too? Don't you want to see your loved ones in heaven one day? Um so it was more of a, if you're not one of us, you're against us kind of thing, and you didn't want to be one of the against us people.
Coercive guilt, I would call it. Right. I mean, you're just being coerced with being made to feel like if you're not part of the same thing that your family is a part of, then you can't be part of the family. Well, no, it's the sad part about when one leaves religion, that does tend to happen, where your family just looks at you like
Mm.
got the cooties over there.
Yeah, and I lucked out. One of the reasons why I'm so vocal about my atheism and about being what I consider an atheist activist, and about being open about that and about my politics and about my social beliefs, is because I'm one of the lucky ones who didn't really lose anything by leaving my religion. In fact, my parents really never ever talk about it. My mom has made maybe 2 comments about it this year. Like, she made a comment the other day about something being a God thing, and then she said, "Even if you don't believe in God," she's like, "That was a God thing."
Oops.
But, like, I know that there are so many people that would like to use the word atheist, but they can't, whether it's because they would lose their family or their job or their marriage or their community or something. There's lots of people in some countries you can get put to death for saying things like that. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so I don't want to, for lack of a better word, I'm so militant about the things that I believe and I'm so open and public about it because it's a privilege that I have that I've never lost anything. I'm so sure that I've lost a bunch of people that just never said anything. They just, defriended me from Facebook or whatever. I know a few because Facebook's like, "Hey, do you know this person? You want to add them?" And I'm like, "Well, I didn't defriend them, so I guess we know." But those are inconsequential in comparison to people who lost everything or would lose everything if they left their church, or if they left their faith, or if they use the word atheist, or if they spoke out publicly using their real name on their YouTube channel about this sort of thing. So, and because I feel like I can hold my own, I feel like I can hold my own and I'm not worried at all about the
Yeah.
consequences. Yeah, they tell us all the time, "Use your privilege." Hell yeah, I've got a lot of privileges. And so why would I not use them on a platform like this, um, to speak out when there are so many people who would love to speak out and they can't for very serious reasons?
Yeah, I've lost a couple of close family members over my speaking out, but I don't know. In the grand scheme of things, um, it's not. It wasn't the biggest impact. I still
Right.
have my parents on my side. Love my parents,
Yeah,
so
yeah. Yeah,
that's
the
important.
people who you quote unquote lose or that I quote unquote lost, they weren't they weren't like, no offense, but they just weren't impactful to begin with. They weren't people that I was worried about keeping around. It's a bummer that they left and they're welcome to come back anytime they want, but I'm not going to pretend, or I'm not going to not speak out about important things and not use my platform and my privilege just because, somebody's auntie's cousin doesn't like it or might not invite me to Easter anymore.
Yeah. Now, speaking of like relationships and like dynamics and stuff, like what there should be, at least there should be certain what's the word I'm looking for, like a criteria for
Mhm,
what we consider to be a relationship, like a proper relationship, not a
mhm,
one-sided parasocial type thing,
mhm.
or like a fangirling. What would you say are some of those requirements
Yeah.
that we should apply to God, to like people should apply to their relationship with God?
Well, I would give the same advice that I give, say, for example, my best friend. If you are always the person reaching out first, if you're always the person touching base, because my best friend and I, we have friends that aren't each other's friends as well. So we'll talk to each other about our outside friends, because we live halfway across the country from each other. And if you're always the one putting in the work, putting in the coordination, reaching out, confirming everything, paying for everything, if you're always the one, making the reservations or asking the other person if they're available, I would tell you that's not a real friend. If you've got people who only want something from you when you've got something to give, or who only communicate with you when you reach out first, that's simply not a good relationship, whether it's romantic, whether it's familial, whether it's friendship. And so I think any type of relationship is equal. It's 50-50. You're reaching out, they're reaching out, you're talking, they're talking. And that can be twice a year, or that can be every day, right? Like, I'm not going to pretend like every single person that I know I talk to all the time and we communicate 50-50. But if you're the only one ever touching base and the other person has never returned a Christmas card, has never attended a birthday party of yours, and you're always showing up for them in every aspect, that's not a good relationship. Whether it's God, whether it's a family member, whether it's a romantic interest, whether it's a friend that, maybe from high school and you feel yourself kind of drifting apart. I remember the last religious person I ever dated, and this was ages ago, he was telling me all these stories about his college days, his college friends, and he was fresh out of school. Um, and I remember after a couple hours, I said, in every single story you're telling me, you're doing something for these people. Like in every single story, you're providing the car, you're giving rides, you're helping move, you're bringing the pizza. I said, in all of these stories, it's not mentioned at all what they're doing other than showing up. And you
Mhm.
could tell that was the first time anyone had ever said that to him. And he was like, wow, you're right. That's kind of intense. And I said, yeah, just something to think about. If these are really your friends, what's the last time they showed up for you or they gave you a ride? Or what's the last time they invited you somewhere and you weren't part of the cleanup crew or and he couldn't think of a single example. Um, and that's not healthy. It's not healthy. That's when you start developing, like codependencies, or you feel like you're not worth being a part of things unless you're serving somehow. And that's just not healthy.
Yeah, I do a lot of stuff for people, right? That is like I don't expect
You
anything
That's
back.
an understatement. That's an understatement.
But like I don't expect anything back other than like at least, an acknowledgement of like, oh hey, if I see you on the street, at least say that you know me. But like with God, the amount of things that people have to do for God, all the things that they have to sacrifice, all the rules that they
Yeah,
have to follow, all of the things they have to do in order to have this access to eternal life and supposedly to God, which I'm not really sure how the relationship's gonna change from how is it supposed to change from Earth to the relationship that you have once you get to heaven. Let's say, is he suddenly gonna be hanging out like having crones and hanging out with everybody all day long? Or
right.
or just
And
not see you once a year?
yeah, and it's an unprovable promise. Right? Like, we all know that person who's like, "Next time I got you. Next time I got you. Next time." And it's like, has has anyone ever gotten what they were promised from this person? Has this person followed through with anybody? If the answer is no, if nobody has witnessed this person return the favor, maybe you shouldn't spend a lot of time with that person.
Back to the relationship of Jesus, because that's the main topic of the
Mhm.
show. Like, we could talk about the realities and versus non-realities of the Bible for a whole separate show. But
Yeah.
anyways, there were some other verses that I picked for today's shows that I wanted to talk about, and this
Mhm.
one that is specifically concerning, and it is when there's threats of violence, even if it's not physical. It's some kind of sort of very harsh wording in John. It says, "Whoever rejects the Son will not see life, for God's wrath remains on them." Now, people will interpret that as, well, no, they mean life as in like eternal life and heaven. But the way it's worded sounds really harsh. It sounds like a threat to
'Cause
me.
it is. 'Cause it is. It's interesting that people say that God gives us free will as long as we do what he says or else be punished. That's not free will. Well, you have the free will to follow him or not. No, I have the threat of eternal damnation or the quote unquote free will to do what he says and not burn in hell. Free will would mean there's no consequences either way. You can pick the chocolate, you can pick the vanilla, you don't have to pick ice cream. It's not you can pick chocolate or you can pick vanilla and burn in hell forever. But we let you choose, but we let you pick, but you got to pick an ice cream. People again, it's insulting to people's sensibilities when you start having these arguments that no, God gives us free will. It's just the free will to choose his way or rot forever in eternal damnation. That's not free will. Don't don't devalue your own intelligence, don't devalue mine, don't insult anyone's intellectual abilities by pretending to believe that that's actually free will. If your little sister walked in and was like, "No, my boyfriend lets me do whatever I want but beats my ass if I choose one direction," you would say, "Hey, that's not free
Mm,
will." That's not so you can do it his way or you can get your ass beat. I guess sounds like free will to me.
yeah, free will mean that you have as many choices as are available, and all of them will give you the same outcome. Not, hey, door number two is gonna take you into the lake of fire. So make sure you,
Yeah.
if you pick door number two and you know it, you know it's gonna take you into the lake of fire. What are you gonna do? I mean, obviously you're not gonna pick door number two. Well,
Right.
I
Right.
guess we did, but
It's like, So you're telling me that behind door number one is a chocolate cake, and behind door number two is a rapist. Interesting. I'm gonna go with door number one. I'm gonna be honest. I'm just gonna go with door number one.
I think that would be the safest. But that's the problem, right? If you are a deep, deep believer, you don't think you have a choice. Like you have the illusion that you have a choice. But at the same time, you know that that choice is going to lead you to that really bad consequence. So you don't really have the free will to choose that door because you
Yep.
know it's going to happen. It is kind of opposite of what of that claim of why does God not show himself to us, right? And they're like, well, because you have free will, and if he shows himself, then you will no longer have free will because he will be the only choice that you have. But no, that is already a choice, right? Like you already can choose that God, and you already know that door number two has the rapist or the lake of fire.
Or the
So
peanuts you're allergic to, or the cockroaches. Like,
oh no, oh no. Ooh, just a word. Thank you.
right.
Trauma. Anyway, no, and it's like no, and it is an illusion of having that free will, and God showing Himself will be the same thing as God telling you that that door has something you don't want to pick. And
Yep.
He can say, okay, that door has something that you do want to pick. Which one is it? Like, whether you choose that one or this one, you're still welcome at my house later.
Yep.
Even if you go hang out at the lake of fire for a couple days, like you
Yep.
can still come back. That will be free will to me.
Yeah. Free will is door number one or door number two. Both have something behind them, or you can just not pick a door. Up to you.
Yeah, that would be a good one to just sit in the lobby, uh, where it's safe, and watch Netflix or something.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I would rather do. Anyway, so the next one was there's one verse that goes, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate their father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." That is so controlling, and it like demands submissiveness. If you don't hate everybody else, but love me and just me, then you can't hang out with me. You can't be my.
That's that exact attitude is why I broke up with my boyfriend when I was 18 because he was so controlling. Lasted about 3 months. Then I was like, oh, gross. I have to give you all of my undivided attention or I'm a cheater. Apparently, no thanks. Now, free will would be the ability to say no thanks with no punishment, with no retribution of any kind. But because it's not free will, there's punishment. There's punishment involved, right? He tells you his rules, he gives you his boundaries, for lack of a better term. And true free will would mean, oh, I can pick the other one and like that's it, the end. But not real free will would be, oh, well, you still have to follow my rules even when you pick to not stick with me. You've decided not to stay with me. Okay, well, you still get the consequences that I decide. Like, what kind of free will is that? The whole point is that I'm not a part of this anymore.
And it's funny because a lot of religious people frame the love of God as something that is unconditional, right? Like, oh yeah, no, He will give you mercy no matter what you do. He will forgive you no matter what you do, as long as you repent. But you have to.
Well, no matter what you do, as long as what you do isn't deny him, isn't not believe in him. So it's not really no matter what you do. It's no matter what you do, as long as what you're doing is what he wants you to do.
Right, it is no longer unconditional. If leaving him or not loving him has consequences, then it's no longer unconditional. Like I love
Yeah.
my kid unconditionally, right? Like if my kid were to say one day, "I don't love you," I will be hurt clearly,
Yeah.
but I will still love them, and I will be like, if they came back and were like, hey, you know what, I say that because I was really upset, or because you hurt me with blah blah blah. I'm sorry about that. It, I would say that's not the same as repenting. It's
Mhm.
just like making up for something that was like a mutual sort of thing, a mutual relationship with somebody that you can actually see. In
Yeah.
the case
Yep.
of God, it's like you do the bad thing, you judge yourself for doing the bad thing, for what you think that God will do to you, despite the fact that you don't have any evidence that that's actually going to happen. It's just something that you're believing. So you're telling yourself that this person you've never seen or never talked to is going to punish you because of what you did. And then you punish yourself for the actions that you thought you were going to be punished for.
Mhm. In any non-abusive relationship, their rules stop mattering or their opinions and thoughts stop mattering when you're no longer in the relationship. In abusive relationships, that's where their rules and boundaries matter in the relationship, and also you get punished outside of the relationship, right? That's where they go, if I can't have you, nobody can. And we see, domestic violence and things. In any healthy relationship, their opinions and thoughts only matter as long as you're in a relationship with them. And then the minute you're like, we're not together anymore, their thoughts and opinions don't matter anymore. They don't get a say. They don't get to punish you. They don't get to instill consequences on you when you're no longer together. The only time you ever see that is in abusive relationships and when domestic violence is involved. And that's what a relationship with God is. One, God's not even real, so it's all pointless. But two, let's just say he was. He would be committing domestic violence because you say, you gave me free will to choose if I want to be in a relationship with you. I'm telling you, no, thank you. I'm not interested. And now, even though we are not together, I am not in a relationship with you. I'm still being punished according to your rules for making the decision to no longer be in a relationship with you.
Yeah, it completely is like that, and it's mind blowing. I remember when I was a Christian, like I came into Christianity later in life, right in my early 20s, for during a vulnerable time when my kid was about to be born with a heart condition, and I was sort of like in a state of mind that where I needed something outside of myself to give me that comfort of like, hey, everything's gonna be okay.
Mhm.
So I felt like for it, and the, then followed the purity culture beliefs. And one of the worst parts aspect of this relationship with God for me was the idea of this constant surveillance. It's like what is the one? I didn't save this one, but there's one about the one Bible verse that says something about how the Lord is everywhere, and it's like always watching, even whether you're good or whether you're bad, right? Like I can't remember the
Like, what
exact
is he,
wording.
Santa Claus?
Right, yeah, like hey, you're getting charcoal this year.
Yeah, sees you when you're sleeping, knows when you're awake, knows when you've been bad or good. Hmm.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It didn't matter what the situation was. I could be just by myself thinking, "Oh my god, I hate this person. I have to go talk to blah blah blah, and I hate it." And I would feel so terrible because I was like, "Oh shit, wait, he's listening. Like he heard me despite me not saying it out loud. It was just a thought, and I had to like constantly ask for that forgiveness of like, hey, I'm so sorry that I even thought that negative thing, that I even thought that bad thing, that I thought about harming someone, or like I thought about not harming someone, but like that someone was that I hated someone. That's the word I was looking for, right?
Mhm.
And oh my god, it feels like such a controlling relationship too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. 100%.
But that leads me to the way something I mentioned earlier that we were talking about what's it called, parasocial relationships, and when in the introduction that I made, right? If you are in this relationship with someone who's invisible,
Mhm.
who never talks to you, or only
Yep.
talks to you but like in the bird that's flying over there, or the butterfly that flew in front of you and like sent you this subliminal message, right? He doesn't like
Okay.
straight
Yep.
eggs. speak to you,
Mhm.
and you can talk to them. Yeah, yeah. But it's like it feels like the same dynamic that someone can get when they become so obsessed with a celebrity that they think they know this celebrity super well, and like they have this sort of like
Like
um
parasocial.
yeah, yeah, parasocial imaginary relationship, and it feels just like that, just like that.
Yeah, yeah. And the even more interesting thing is, again, like, I don't even think God is real. So, not only is it like a parasocial relationship, but it's like, do you remember when Twilight came out and people were obsessed with Edward, and Edward is my boyfriend, and I would do anything for Edward, and Edward is the hottest person I've ever seen, and Edward, I'm gonna change my last name to Cullen on my binder. They were, for lack of a better term, for an internet term, they were simping for somebody who didn't even exist, for a fictional character. So now we've got people who are dictating the entire life they live, the rules they follow, the things they say they believe, the actions they take for a fictional character. And it's very alarming. And in any other instance, if any other fictional character was taken as seriously as people take God, you'd be committed to a psychiatric ward.
Heck yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. That's it. Like I don't like saying, oh, that religion is a mental illness, but and I don't want, but there is an aspect of having a relationship with, like I said, with somebody that you've never seen, you've never talked to. However, this being has somehow given you all of these rules that you are demanded to follow, and if you don't follow them, then you're going to be punished. It is really problematic for me, even as someone who experienced that herself, right, in the past, to imagine how someone um, excuses having this completely one-sided relationship and not even thinking about the fact that, like I said a moment ago, it is yourself judging your own actions based on your own interpretation of what you think this imaginary being is going to do. So it's all yourself. You're doing the whole thing to yourself, and it's so harmful for people's mental health. It makes you feel like you're not supposed to trust yourself, which is actually one of the verses, the one about not leaning in your own understanding, that you have to submit to God's, and He will make sure that that He covers your path and everything. And it's like you can't trust yourself. You don't take any responsibility for your own actions, or whether they be good or whether they be negative, right? And I just don't know how we help people get past that specific part of this relationship with a God.
I think it's something that people have to do, unfortunately, on their own. I think that if there were no punishments in religion, the majority of people would not be religious. I truly believe that if people were honest with themselves, they would admit that the reason they are devoutly religious or even religious at all is because they're afraid of hell, and they're afraid of punishment, or they're afraid of the afterlife, depending on what religion it is that you serve. Um, and I genuinely believe that the majority of people would not be religious in any way if there was no such thing as hell, if there was no punishment, if you didn't pick that way, blah blah blah. But I think in terms of getting people to see, or getting people to understand, or getting people to kind of open their mind, that has to be something they do on their own. And I say that as somebody who's been through that. Um, I actually was Christian longer than I would have been on my own, because somebody I was dating was such a militant atheist and was
Oh wow.
constantly rubbing atheism in my face, and was constantly making me engage in these debates and these questions on a regular basis, and basically antagonizing me to the point where I turtled back into my religion shell, because that's where I felt safest. I felt like I had to defend it all the time. I felt like I was just always on the defense. And I actually stayed Christian for a lot longer, and I almost felt like that was what I got for dipping my toe out of the faith. Like, oh, this is what people are like outside of the church. They'll always attack you. They'll always tell you you're dumb for being a Christian. They'll always just like force you into these arguments, into these debates. Now in hindsight, I'm like, oh no, that was just a shitty boyfriend. Shocker. But I think by when a lot of times when people in our space think that they're being helpful, or think that they're, pulling a gotcha, or think that they're making a point, they might actually be doing more harm than good when it comes to actually leading people to a life outside of the church. It's just like any other goals. It's just like people who want to lose weight. It's just like people who want to save money. It's just like people who want to change their life, want to go back to school. The more you hassle them about it and the more you bring it up, the less they're going to want to talk about it, think about it, explore it, and then the next thing you know, you've actually done the opposite. Those they say this in relationships a lot too. Don't try to convince the girl to leave. You'll scare her into staying. Let her kind of figure out on her own or make her own attempts. Otherwise, she's just going to cut you off and not talk to you anymore because she doesn't want to hear it. And so, unfortunately, I think it's one of those things people just have to figure out on their own, and they have to learn on their own. Now, you can leave that door open. There's a lot of people in my life who just ask me questions, and I answer all their questions in good faith, and I never press them, and I never push them, and I never debate with them. But I always answer their questions. I'm always open if they want to have a conversation. I'm always open if they're confused, or maybe they're not sure where they stand, or they want a different perspective. I will always have those conversations with people. But at the point where you're like, and another thing, oh, and I bet God did that for you, that's going to scare people. Yeah. And it's going to prove the church right. The church tells people in the outside world, in the secular world, people don't believe in God. They're going to make fun of you. They're going to try and make you question your faith. They're going to try and make you, participate in things like drugs and sex and parties and all the earthly things. And it's going to look like fun, but it's not. And you're just proving them right. And so, unfortunately, it has to be that person's decision. And in regular relationships, in regular abusive relationships, it takes on average 7 attempts to leave before a woman successfully leaves an abusive relationship. And I think religion's very similar. I think it's going to take a lot of reading and Googling and questioning and secretly watching things and secretly listening to things for somebody to really start to question things and start making any kind of attempt to change their mind.
Yeah, I like that. I have one experience that is just like that. We have a family member, and 2 years ago when I started my channel, one of the very first episodes that I did, I loved, like I said, listening to Anthony Magnabosco's epistemology show, right? And so that was the topic of my first show. And so I had him and my husband and my kid, and we all sat down together and we started talking. And I would just ask them questions, like in an epistemology way. And we ended up talking about demons and then about crime, right? Like Jeffrey Dahmer type crimes, and how at one point I was like, hey, he was very much for like the death penalty sort of punishment for any crime, just like throw them into the wood chipper sort of person, right? And I was like, hey, listen, do you think that this? Do you think that that? Blah, blah, blah. And then we came to a point where I said something like, so do you think that it would be fair if we both fairly punished, but also fairly rehab most most criminals for like the majority of the things that happens? And he's like, whoa, that it blew his mind that you could do both of them. And so we continued to have these conversations off screen over the next year. And then at that point he was like very devout Christian, like, refused to read the Old Testament because like only the New Testament counts and sort of thing. One time I accidentally thought that he was a Catholic, and he's like, no, I'm a Christian. It's not the same. That's sort of like strong. Yeah. And so the next year, which was last year, he came with us to NanoCon.
I remember that.
And yeah, you met him. He thought you were awesome, by the way. Yay. And so he loved it. He loved the godless gospel. He loved your comedy. He he just loved like the speeches that he got to watch and stuff and meet everybody. And again, over the next 8 months or so, we continued conversations, very respectful. I was talking
Mhm.
openly about religion and politics often, and with everything going on with the war in Iran, and seeing a lot more about Jewish, about the religion aspect of the war, right? He began to say, like, holy crap, this is wrong. And you realize, like, wait a minute, like, if my culture gives me my religion and their culture gives them their religion,
Yep.
what does that mean for me? And very, very recently, like within the last few weeks, he's like, I am no longer religious. He's like, I believe in a God and
Mhm.
some type of
Yeah.
creator, but I no longer consider myself religious. And I was like, holy
Interesting.
crap.
Yeah,
I was
and
like, oh,
yeah, and, like, it's something that he can say with all sincerity that he came to on his own, and you were there for the conversation, but, like,
yeah,
nobody badgered him or pushed him into it, he just decided on his own that that's how he feels, and I think that is a lasting impact. That's something that will stay with him and is much more likely to be part of his beliefs for a long time because he came to it on his own conclusion.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really good.